There's something about American foreign policy that almost nobody noticed, until now. In 1971, while Americans were glued to their TVs watching the Vietnam War unfold, something else was happening. Something quiet. Something that didn't make headlines. A secret meeting in Beijing that would reshape the entire global order. And when I started investigating this, I had no idea where it would lead. Look at this map. Here's the world in 1971. Cold War. Two superpowers, USA and USSR. Now look at this, July 9, 1971. Henry Kissinger boards a plane in Pakistan. Officially, he's sick with a stomach bug. That's what the press was told. But here's where he actually went, Beijing. For 22 years, the United States refused to acknowledge that Communist China even existed. We had no embassy there. No diplomatic relations. No communication. And then, suddenly, everything changed. Not because of democracy. Not because of human rights. Because of something much more calculated. Let's rewind. Communist Revolution in China. Mao Zedong takes power. The U.S. immediately picks a side, Taiwan. We pretend mainland China doesn't exist. For 2 decades, this was American policy. Simple comparison. Think of it like this. Imagine having a neighbor who controls half your street. And you just pretend they're not there. That was U.S.-China relations. But here's the detail almost nobody looks at. By 1969, something changed. The Soviet Union and China, both communist, started hating each other. Border conflicts. Ideological splits. Real violence. And Richard Nixon saw an opportunity. Nixon had a theory. What if the U.S. could befriend China? Not because we liked communism, but because it would terrify the Soviets. It's called triangular diplomacy. And it was brilliant. Here's what nobody talks about. The Vietnam War was going terribly. 58,000 Americans dead. No end in sight. And guess who was supplying North Vietnam? China and the Soviet Union. Nixon needed leverage. He needed a way to pressure the Soviets. And China was the key. I got access to declassified State Department cables from 1971. These weren't easy to find. National Archives. Heavily redacted. Some pages still classified. And what I found was shocking. Listen to this. Kissinger's memo to Nixon, July 14, 1971. The Chinese are prepared to receive you. They understand this is not about ideology. This is about power. They want recognition. We want to isolate Moscow. Both sides win. Both sides win. This wasn't about making friends. This was a transaction. I spoke with Winston Lord, who was Kissinger's aide on that secret trip. He told me. We landed in Beijing and immediately knew this would change everything. The Chinese treated us like royalty. Why? Because they needed us as much as we needed them. Look at this map of Soviet influence in 1971. All these countries, Eastern Europe, Cuba, North Vietnam, parts of Africa. The USSR was expanding. Now look at what happened after Nixon's visit to China in 1972. Soviet expansion slowed. Why? Because suddenly they had to worry about a two-front problem. The U.S. on one side, China on the other. And there's more. This wasn't just about military strategy. It was about economics. In 1971, the U.S. was in economic trouble. The dollar was weak. Gold reserves draining. Nixon needed to open new markets. And China, with 800 million people, was the biggest untapped market on Earth. This is where everything changed. February 21, 1972. Richard Nixon steps off Air Force One in Beijing. The footage is surreal. An American president shaking hands with communist leaders. The whole world watching. Within 5 years of that handshake, U.S.-China trade went from $0 to $2.30 billion. Soviet military spending increased 40%, trying to keep up. The Vietnam War ended. North Vietnam lost Chinese support. 113 countries switched diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to mainland China. These numbers didn't make front pages, but they changed the world. The Soviets panicked. Suddenly, their biggest ally was talking to their biggest enemy. And in 1972, for the first time, the USSR agreed to major arms reduction talks with the U.S. SALT I Treaty. Signed in Moscow. Why? Because Nixon had leverage now. Here's the most tragic part. Taiwan, America's ally for 22 years, was abandoned. In 1979, the U.S. officially recognized Beijing, kicked Taiwan out of the UN, cut diplomatic ties. Not because it was right, because it was strategic. Now let's connect the dots. China is the world's second-largest economy. They manufacture everything we use. Our phones, our computers, our clothes. And it all started with that secret meeting in 1971. That handshake in 1972. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Geopolitics isn't about good versus evil. It's about power versus power. Nixon didn't befriend China because Mao suddenly became democratic. He did it because it served American interests. I started this investigation thinking I'd find a hero, someone who brought peace. But what I found was calculation. A system where nations use each other, where allies are disposable, where strategy trumps morality. And maybe, after understanding this, you'll never see U.S.-China relations the same way. Because it's not about cooperation. It's about a deal made 54 years ago. A deal that quietly reshaped global power. And we're still living in the world it created, whether we like it or not.